Slide two brothers meet one another when they slide up to the mic. It's bread and butter with one another. Let's start up that recording light.
Welcome to Bread and Butter, everybody, the Hearthstone podcast where we serve you up the basics the average Hearthstone player needs to improve their game. This week, it's episode 16, and once again, we have the lovely Dragon Rider as our guest. Dragon Rider, how are you doing today?
Hello, I'm doing well. I'm excited to be back and talk about some more Hearthstone stuff. It's exciting.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you. Tito, how have you been doing?
I'm doing fantastic, Doc. It's good to have you back on the show. I'm wondering if we need to change up the motto there to start, because I think you stumble on it every time.
I mean, I don't read it. I just
words.
like I know it's there. I don't read it. I just say it.
Wait, that's why it's in the notes.
I know.
You know what? I will say, okay, for the TCCG Roundtable, okay, another podcast that I do that I created, I came up with the name, I did all that. There was still an episode I said TGG instead of TCC. And it was like, and I didn't even realize it until I went back to edit. I was like, oh, how did I mess up my own named podcast? I don't know. But you know what? It happens. Sometimes we just stumble over things, or our brains fill in something and then our tongue just follows suit.
Yup.
Well, that's what you need to have the tagline, something like TCCG. Yeah, you know me.
I feel like I would mess that up so bad. Don't make more things rhyme. I'll mess it up worse.
So, Dragon Rider, what have you been doing inside and outside of the game of Hearthstone?
Oh my goodness. I mean, outside of Hearthstone, can I claim all of the content that I've been doing? It's still kind of Hearthstone, but
absolutely.
Yeah,
that's inside and outside.
There you go,
so,
both.
Yeah. Both.
All sorts of content, the couple of podcasts that I do every week. We have recently, for Amberflight Gaming, have announced that Amberflight Gaming has expanded into Pokemon VGC, which has been really exciting. So we've added some new members. So I've been trying to also start learning more about VGC, because as the leader of the team and the CEO, I want to try to know what's going on with the games that everyone on the team's playing. So I've been trying to watch that and follow that. I understand nothing unless they're Gen 1 Pokemon, and I'm I know that one. Yeah. All right. But yeah, everything else I'm I don't know what's happening, but it's exciting. So that's kind of what's been going on with me outside of the game. Inside of Hearthstone, been just kind of trying to focus a little bit on improving my gameplay even farther, to push more towards 11 star more consistently, and continue my journey for not only journey to 11, yes, Tito, do that, but also my climb towards 20,000 ranked wins. So it's been exciting.
Oh, I haven't missed that.
Nope, no, not yet.
I have this habit. I go into Dawn's stream just about every day. And I usually have it up because I'm working at the same time, but I always ask him oh, did I miss 20K? Did I miss it? And it's probably not going to happen until April or May or something. Yeah. So it's been an ongoing gag.
It is. I love it.
So how about yourself, Doc?
So inside of Hearthstone, I've been playing a lot of Battlegrounds. I've been playing Dude Paladin and some Unholy DK. Outside of Hearthstone, which I feel has happened a lot more than inside of Hearthstone the last couple of weeks since everyone last heard from me. But I've been playing a lot of Discard Apocalypse in Marvel Snap. Been playing a lot of Devil Dinosaur as well. Destiny 2 just had a new expansion come out, and I've been loving that, but I'm stuck on one of the campaign missions. And then I've been doing a lot of fishing in World of Warcraft because my friends and I really want to get the otter. And the coolest thing is I adopted a cat.
Oh, kitty!
And his name?
Where is that cat?
He's under the bed.
Oh.
His name is Brother. He's around 10 years old.
Oh.
And he is so cute. He's already used to when we wake up in the morning, and we've had him for like 2 weeks. So when we wake up at 6 a.m., he is meowing for food immediately as he starts hearing our alarms go off. And he's just the sweetest little guy. He's just the sweetest guy. He had, unfortunately, a pretty rough and enclosed early life. His first house was a hoarding situation. And so he spent the first several years of his life in like a 4x4 area. But he's been loving our apartment. He is not afraid of people. He's just more afraid of the environment with like the noises he doesn't like recognize yet. But he's been playing, he's been cuddling, he's like chilling with us on the couch now. He hasn't sat in our laps yet or like gotten on the bed to like cuddle when we go to bed. But he's making a lot of good progress, and that's all you can really ask when you adopt a cat. So
Oh, absolutely.
Doc will get me a picture and we will put it up on the Twitter.
Yeah. And wait till you get like down the line, and then the cat's like walking, like, you know, rubbing against the microphone with tail in your face, and you're like, okay. Like, remember when we got you and you're still scared?
That's the quickest way to get ridiculous habits.
Yeah,
Bring a cat.
is.
Yeah.
Bring a cat.
I love it.
So
Yes.
But also,
what about yourself, Tito? What have you been doing in and out of Hearthstone?
well, before we get to me, we also have to talk. The last episode was delayed a bit. You were actually become the podcast host.
Yeah, so
You want to talk about that journey?
yeah, so I guess this will be my dessert now, but big shout outs to Ridiculous Hat for helping me over the course of a few days. Initially, it was me asking him a couple questions because there was just a lot of issues with the last episode. And with my old editing process, it was next to impossible to fix it. So then Hat walked me through how to use Audition. And then ultimately he was like, hey, send me the files. Let me see what I need to do to get them to work. So I did that. And then he told me what to do. And then once that happened, it was maybe just like 2 hours of editing / listening to it to make sure it was okay. I feel like there was a couple like little blips where I forgot to like quiet something out, but it's definitely going to streamline the process here in the future. So big shout outs to Ridiculous Hat for helping me figure that out. And sorry to Tito, Just a Guy, and Vandit Keith for how long that took.
No, I only bring it up in because like I had declared it dead because it sounded like it was never going to see the light of day, and I appreciate the work that you put into it to get there and also to improve the process. So this wasn't me calling out Doc to pick on him. This is me because he put a lot of work in to make it happen, and I know we still need to work on like our audio quality and stuff like that. So anyone that's listening, we appreciate that you're sticking with us as we go through this process. I think we're doing all right. We're 15 episodes in. We're still here. I think we've jumped the hump where podcasts usually die. I think we're in the top like 20% of podcasts because we're still living, and you know we've eclipsed the weekly wipe. We're golden.
Yeah, we sure did.
Anyway.
We sure did eclipse the weekly wipe.
What is the weekly wipe? Is
Oh,
that
you
like
don't
a
know what
raid
that
wipe?
is?
I don't know what this is. I just
So,
think like, wow,
please-
raid wipe.
So anyone listening to this, please, for all the respect you have for your boy Doc McButt, do not look up the weekly wipe. It was my first go at podcasting, and it was by myself when I was couch surfing, recorded in a room where the AC never stopped. So the AC was in the background. But it was about Hearthstone. It was about Smite. It was about basically it was about the games that I cared about. And I'll finish the name, The Isle, which is a dinosaur game, and it's fantastic, and I recommend it to anyone who loves dinosaurs. But yeah, that lasted 2 episodes. And it's definitely not listenable on Spotify, so please don't look for it because it is atrocious. It is awful.
And And I guarantee you guys that when we launch a Patreon, we'll have a Patreon bonus.
They could be.
Let's go. I'm ready. Sign me up. I need to hear this.
Me too.
You really don't, but if you want to, you can. Okay, Tito, what have you been doing in and out of Hearthstone?
Well, in Hearthstone, so last month I made Legend, and I really like. I mentioned last week we starting this journey to 11, where myself, Dawn here, a few other streamers, we're going to do this progress report kind of project where we're looking at our play, and we're going to try to get to 11 stars as a general kind of goal. The concept is just self-improvement, and also make content about it, and figure out different things that can help. Because in the end, we want to create kind of a YouTube piece that it helps people that get to a higher legend. Because the goals, you always hear like, how do I get to legend? How do I get to legend? How do I get to legend? That's only the start of the journey. And if you want to become a player, if you want to get on Hearthstone and you want to play, the ridiculous hats and the wicked goods and the bunny hoppers and whoever else that play at that level, you want to get your game higher enough so you can get up there. And that's kind of I think a missing piece of climbing, because no one really kind of talks about that. And the concept of the Journey to 11 is to kind of go over that and hopefully make a guide, not a helpful guide. I don't think everyone's going to make it there, but it's like, hey, what did you try? What you didn't try? How do you make it fit into your world? Because not everyone can just grind games all day, every day. So it's kind of like what we're working on that, and I'm very excited about that. But I played a lot more Legend games last month than I ever have. I think I got like 200 plus Legend games in, and I hit Legend today, and I'm planning on doing the same thing. And I'm like, right now I came in, I think I'm right around 1,400, and I want to play a lot, so I at least try to maintain that. And if I drop down to 8K or 9K, it's not a big deal. I'm trying to learn. I want to get over that anxiety. And this is our control month. So we're not trying to change anything this month, particularly. It's like, hey, let's get some metrics to start with, and then we can kind of take April and on and say, okay, what are things we can do to try to improve it? So that's what I've been doing, mostly in Hearthstone. I've been playing. I got to Legend last month with Frost DK, the Aggro Frost DK. I played Legend with Evil Half Shaman. That's pretty much all I played. This month I got there with the Undead Shadow Priest, and right now I've been kind of testing out. I tested out Blister Guys, Quest Druid. I've been trying the Tomberry Blues list for Shadow Priest. Trying to find a deck to play with, but we'll get there. Outside of Wild, just work, life, same thing. But Doc, what do you think about podcasts?
Yeah, so we're still early, but we've been around for a little bit. So just like every other podcast, we're going to ask, but if you could please leave us a 5-star review and let us know how we're doing as a show, that will help us out a lot, because it helps with the discoverability of the show. So currently we have one, and it was a great one. And I'm sure whenever we get another one, it's going to be great too, and we'll read it on the show. But please, if you like the show and you want to let us know how we're doing, whether it's good or bad, leave us that review and we'll read it on the show.
And if it's bad, then Doc will have trouble editing it, and we'll
yeah.
So anyway, normally after we do our intro talk, we usually interview our guests. But since Dawn is our monthly guest, we don't want to interview her again. You already know all about her. She's fantastic. But today we're going to talk about the current state of the meta, because it's pretty interesting where we are in this meta currently. And we were talking about it before the show. And right now there are 7 tier 1 decks. And I think we said there were, 18 tier 2 decks? So we're just going to kind of talk a little bit about the current state of things and what we like, what we don't like, and just generally talk.
Okay.
So as we're looking at this, let's take a look at this tier 1 list, and we have it in the show notes here. I'm surprised Imploc's up there. I've seen a little bit of Imploc, but not a ton. I've seen plenty. What Silverhand Paladin? What is that?
That's just Dude Paladin.
Because I've seen a little bit of that, but it also just feels like the same old list with the Countess.
Yeah, I don't think it's any different. That's what, if it's the same deck I've been playing, which I mean, just call it the same thing. But yeah, I think it's the same. I don't think there's a new card in there from the mini set.
Not even the Pure Raider. I've seen Pure Raider Paladin too. Oh, that's a Pure Paladin just down there. Great. How's that deck been feeling?
It feels pretty good. I will say one of my most agonizing matches was against a Curse Implock. But it was just rough. They were able to brand into the 3/4 that puts a curse into your hand. So by turn 8, I already had 5 curses, and this paladin deck does a lot of self damage. So I was at a very low life total very quickly. I mean, they were too. They healed a little bit, but I had a couple swing turns to get them back down within lethal range, but it wasn't enough. But it's been good. Granted, I haven't played a lot. I'm only in mid silver right now, but I definitely like how it feels to play more than Unholy DK, because that's the other deck I've been playing.
I would definitely, if you're playing that list, I wouldn't play. If you're having troubles with health, don't play the 6/6 that your next minion costs life, because that's bait, and that usually is just a bad play if you're inching towards death.
Yeah, I think I've only ever actually played that card one time.
What card did I play? I played against that deck today, and they got their invitations, and one of their invitations was I think it was a mage legendary that we gave them the spells that they played that turn or something like that. I've never seen that card actually played until today, but it works pretty well in Dude Paladin. I still won that matchup, but it was scary for a little while. How about you, Dawn? You've been playing any of the ones on this list here, or?
So actually, I wanted to mention that here, and I think it kind of ties with your topic about talking to the Journey to 11. This is something where I have the HS Replay Premium, so I can filter, and at Legend, the decks look much different than what we're talking about here.
Ooh.
So I do just want to preface that Legend decks versus maybe, gold or silver and kind of the meta decks, or maybe if you go and watch, higher level streamers, the decks that you're seeing might be different than what you play against. And I think that's just something important to kind of keep in mind, where you might go and watch a streamer, listen to somebody, and they'll say, play this deck, it's the best. And then you might go and you're like, wow, this deck just dies to everything that I'm facing against. So that's an important thing. I have not been seeing any Dude Paladins, anything like that, but definitely the classy Paladin that's running Countess. Absolutely have seen some of that. I haven't really been seeing much Warlock myself. For me, at least, lately it's still felt like quite a bit of Death Knight. Still a lot of Frost Death Knights and Blood Death Knights for what I've been facing against. But also it's kind of early in the season, and sometimes people just want to, they'll have 10 or 11 stars that I'm facing, and we'll get to D5 into Legend. They just kind of play whatever. So this early in the season, I'm not putting too much stock into everything that I've seen so far.
Yeah, and that's a good point. When you see when you see Meaty play, he's playing a deck, and he's going to tweet out that this is the deck to play. It's big. Same thing with John Ray. Same thing with everybody that posts those decks. They are playing in a meta that is maybe 5 classes, 5 decks, something like that, because all the high legend players are playing these very limited things, and you're not seeing the wide range of decks we're seeing. Fun story kind of on that. So I had my coin concede coaching this week, or last Sunday, and I had it was wicked good, and it was 3 days before the patch, and I had been climbing with Shaman. I feel like I knew Shaman pretty well, and I said, I don't want to play that. I want to play Shadow Priest, because I feel like that's the deck that's going to be worth climbing to when I'm climbing with once the meta shifted. I didn't want to keep. I wanted to be ready for that. So let's do a coaching now because it was still an okay deck. It was going to get better. Seemed logical to me. First game we play, we queue up into Edelweiss.
Amazing.
She's playing a Control Pirate Quest warrior. And we lost that game when she double boated us. And at the very end, both boats gave her Gorhal. And she got
wow.
That happened to me on stream today, too. I played against somebody that was doing that, and they got Gorhal twice in a row. It's like, wow.
But likely you're not going to see that at the high level.
No.
Yeah, she got us good. So out of these decks, so just general, look at these. Are there any decks you've been enjoying playing, Dawn, or any decks you've been really kind of struggling against, or any of these tilting?
I mean, I've been playing the Curse in block for 3-4 months now. I've absolutely loved that deck. Personally, the Imp Warlock, pretty similar. And the Undead Priest, the aggro Shadow Priest, kind of whichever way you say it. That is also a pretty fun deck as well. There's a couple of slight different versions I've seen, but they all seem to do decently well. I don't typically play a lot of big spell mage. I have tried it. But I typically like to play more of the aggressive, low curve type of decks. I have not been impressed with Frost Death Knights because I hate playing against it because it always feels like they just kill me. I'm they always have damage from hands and I hate it. So yeah, and they always discover the last bit of damage that they need to kill me, and I'm just stop doing that, stop it, no, so
it's a fun deck to play, but it's frustrating to play.
Yeah, so that's kind of been where I'm at with these decks.
I was a little surprised that they didn't nerf Frostworm's Fury when they did the last round of nerfs. Not that it's the most egregious card, but it's one of those feels cards that when you get to turn 7, they usually have 3 of them, and then it's freeze, dead. And normally, I kind of thought that was one they might tweak just a little bit. That's not the one that tilts me, though. Blood is the one that tilts me. Because, again, I was playing the aggro decks and all that, but just... And I know these cards are fair. I'm not saying they need to be nerfed, but I get blood boiled, and I just go, come on. And then they play the No Muncher, and I'm like, come on.
Blood boil. Is that the board wipe that heals them, too? Yeah, yes. I hate that card with a passion. Because, I like playing mid-range and aggro, so it's just okay, well, that single card just removed everything I did this game. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, no, I don't like that one at all.
And again, it's fair. It's a good card. And also then, when they do, the card that gives them 10 health, that card, I think, is costed fine, but I think it needs to cost more corpses. I think that 3 is too little. I think it needs to cost 5. I think in order to get the extra benefit. If you're going to get that effect, I think it's too corpse cheap, honestly. But when they get up to 50, 60 health, and then you still get them down, and then they do something else that heals them, or they play their arena or whatever it's like that, you're like, come on.
Well,
some men just want to see the world.
So theoretically, come rotation, they could do another balance patch in there to balance stuff out for the next expansion coming in to give those cards a chance. So, I mean, it could happen. They could still change Frostworm's Fury and do a couple minor adjustments there to just kind of let the new cards. I mean, I don't know. I mean, we don't know if it's going to be an aggressive expansion or what yet, but there's still a chance because I feel like they've done balance changes with rotation a couple times.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they're going to change all that much because nothing's egregious. And if you look at, again, 7
yeah,
tier 1 decks,
it's very fair.
Decks,
I mean,
it actually makes me so.
It's
I mean, I've been thinking that I want to build a deck, but I don't want to mess around. But because I want to win, and building a deck usually means losing. But looking at how spread out things are, maybe this is actually time to possibly experiment a little bit, because it seems like you can win with just about everything.
Yeah.
Also, I had a Chad Warlock that they got the slime down, I think, on turn 3, and then they do the spell that that triggers the death rattle, and then
Shallow Grave.
They got two.
Yeah,
Shallow Grave. They got 2 Chads on turn 4 or 5, and I was like, come on.
Yep, I did that like the day of the patch, and I was like, who's the shaman now? That's right, like shaman get nerfed, and now I'm gonna do this as the warlock. It felt good for that like 1 or 2 games that I did it.
2 things on that. One, I don't know if they fixed this yet, but the Blazing Transformation, and that card probably should have went to 2 mana. But for a while after the patch, if you used it on the null, it was still evolving into 10 mana minions. So even though it was supposed to no longer do that, it was still doing that. But secondly, the one thing I didn't realize about that until I had this happen against me more than once, where they evolved into a 10 mana thing like a giant, and then they evolved it again. And if you evolve something for 10 mana now, it becomes a null, because a null is now 11 mana. So you aren't cycling through these 10 mana cards anymore. You go from 10 mana, giant, 8 giant, to a null. Deathwing, null. You get null. And it is fantastic. And I've had 2 shame concedes happen when they did that, saw the null, hovered over it for a minute, concede.
Yeah.
And that feels really good.
Probably not for them that did it. They were like, ooh, ouch. But
no, but it was definitely feel good for me. All right, well, I think I'm getting a little hungrier. What do you think? Time for some dinner?
Yeah, I think so, Tito.
So, Dawn, this week's topic, archetypes. This is a highly controversial topic.
Yes.
We were in the Coin Concede Discord the other day, and the topic of what is undead priest came up, and is it a mid-range? Is it a aggro? Is it a combo? Is it what? It's the naming of it is supposed to be for shorthand, just to kind of give you things, but it becomes such a debate on what things are. So take it away. Let's learn about archetypes.
Yeah, absolutely. So I wanted to cover this partly because it is kind of that controversial, like different people have different kind of definitions or different decks that fit into different definitions of archetypes. And it can be a little confusing, especially if you're trying to learn, if you're trying to improve. Maybe if you're watching streamers or listening to podcasts, and you hear one person say, this deck is an aggro deck, and then you go and somebody else is like, this is a combo deck. And you're like, well, what does that even mean? And which one is it? You know? So wanted to talk about these. So there's, I want to say 4, maybe you can argue 5 major archetype, at least like names that you'll hear, which is aggro, mid-range, control, combo, and then OTK. OTK and combo can sometimes, like people sometimes use those interchangeably, but again, some of these, they might kind of overlap. If you think about it, I would say, honestly, these categories are a bit more like Venn diagrams. So if you're unfamiliar with a Venn diagram, right, you have one circle here, like maybe this circle is aggro and then this circle is mid-range, but they kind of have a little bit of overlap. And in that, yeah, there you go. For anyone watching on the video version, Tito just drew it there. So I kind of feel like there is that crossover, and that's often where you get maybe one person calling something aggro, one person calling a deck mid-range. But I kind of wanted to go over what, at least in general, these things kind of mean, so that if you're trying to improve and you're trying to listen, or you read an article about something, you can kind of get an understanding of at least what they're talking about. So aggro is typically it's kind of shorthand for aggressive. They're usually more low curve type decks. So most of the cards in the deck are very cheap to play. They're going to cost 1 through 4 mana typically. Once you start adding more like 5, 6, maybe an 8 cost card, then people will start arguing, say, well, now it's mid-range, not aggro. But often it's that low curve. They're very aggressive. They want to just push a lot of face damage is typically what they do. They want to just beat you down very, very quickly. Mid-range decks are typically more just play something every turn. They can be a little bit aggressive, but often it's just more about getting to do something every turn as much as you can. Control decks usually have a focus on just controlling the opponent's board. So either single target removal, big board AoE, which would be like Brawl or some other effect like Blood Boil that we were just talking about, right? That affects multiple things on the board. And then kind of tries to close out the game in some other way later, much later in the game. Turn 8, 9, 10, or farther down the road. Combo decks typically have some sort of combination of cards that they want to use to pull off some big fancy play. I would say even the Warlock deck currently that you mentioned, Tito, like the Chadlock, the big Warlock, as some people are calling it, that has the slime, and then you do maybe Shallow Grave, or you try to pull out some other things from your deck, try to revive things. That could be considered something like a combo deck. And then
Lorenda calls it horse.
yeah, I mean, then nobody knows what deck is being talked about. And then the last I would say is OTK, which, if you're not familiar, stands for 1 turn kill. So those decks potentially could be pulling off a combo, or they could be just trying to do something that doesn't even necessarily deal damage, but it ends the turn kind of quickly, right? So it could be a buildup of turns, but it's ending in like one big massive turn. I would say even the Horseman kind of could qualify for that, right? You get all the Horsemen and then that goes off. Cthulhu was kind of a combo OTK style. Sometimes it's about amassing a bunch of spells in your hand that deal damage, and then you just send all of those spells at your opponent's face all in one turn for massive damage. There was some Demon Hunter decks that kind of did that, right? That sent a bunch of damage, or built up like you played a bunch of fell spells and then played Jace for a big, huge swing with your weapon, and then you hit them in the face and ended the game. So that's kind of just like the general, again, these categories, these archetypes are kind of that Venn diagram. So some of them do kind of overlap, and depending on what cards you may see in a deck, you could kind of argue, like I mentioned, if it's an aggro deck, but you have something that costs 5, something that costs 6, something that costs 7, and something that costs 8. Is it still an aggro deck, or is it mid-range? That's kind of debatable, but those are the generals kind of definitions, I guess, that you can at least use as a framework when you are looking at these decks and trying to learn and understand. So then when either you're building a deck or you are looking at how you want to play maybe in a matchup, if you can recognize, hey, my opponent is not really playing a lot of cards, for example, or all of the cards that my opponent has played so far are removal cards, then you can kind of say, okay, that's a control deck. And then you can think, a control deck wants to remove all of my stuff and then win much later in the game. And then you can, then keep taking those steps. Okay, if that's their plan, what can I do to try to end the game early? Or what can I do to play around that removal, or force them to use all of that removal and then have a big board afterwards? So you'll learn a lot of that the more that you play and get comfortable with those. So it definitely changes, but that is kind of my framework for Archetypes. What do you guys think?
I mean,
I think it makes a lot of sense.
yeah,
Go ahead, Doc.
I mean, I was going to say the same thing. That was very, very solid and covered each archetype and how they overlap very well. So Dawn, she has a magnificent brain. She knows what she's talking about.
I think there's a lot of nuance there, though, too, right? Like, if you think about it, like, if you're playing a control warrior that has a combo at the end to beat you, is that a combo or is it a control? It doesn't matter. These words that we're using are just, they're not to classify the deck. They're to help you kind of figure out how those decks are supposed to be played. And just because you're an aggro deck doesn't mean you have to play aggro. Like, I think a good example is if you are playing a shadow priest with the undead package, and you are playing against a aggro druid, you won't play that matchup. Like, you can try to play that matchup as a aggro deck, but you will probably lose. In that case, as I think a good way is like you're either in the beatdown or the defending or whatever. You're doing one of the two. And in that case, whenever I play the aggro druid, I switch from aggro mode to I want to keep their board clear, and I have the resources once I weather their storm to then I kind of almost turn into a mid-range deck, right? Because even though I'm playing it as an aggro deck, in that case I'm not. So each matchup might dictate what that is. These are just words that help you to understand how to play.
Yep.
And generally what the deck does.
Yeah, like the 3 metas ago when Shockspitter was still around. My favorite Shockspitter games were the games that would go 10, 15 turns because it would really like make me think and have to play this deck differently instead of just like going just all in on trying to get as many Shockspitters as possible, realizing the kind of matchup I was in, and then shifting to how do I make as many resources as possible that I can just meter out throughout this game and just keep a solid tempo. So it just depends. Like sometimes it's fun. And admittedly, there would be a couple times where I would purposely play slower to try to challenge myself on finding different ways to get there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one really tricky thing with card games in general. And looking at that is there's a couple different things there, right? Is that sometimes the way that you play a certain matchup might change, right? Like if you are even a pretty low curve deck, but maybe you're facing another low curve deck, you might have to play a little bit more defensively instead of just going for their face, depending on how that matchup is playing out. A good example is something like the Unholy DK or like aggro druids from the past that really rely on keeping minions on the board. Whereas something like the Shadow Priest has the hero power to ping down or maybe damage from death rattles that can go face. So you can kind of change how you play based on the list that you're playing, even if they're both considered aggro, for example. So that's kind of something that, again, this is, as you play the decks, as you see that, you'll learn. It is really kind of tricky in something like Hearthstone and even a lot of these like digital card games as well, because you can easily change decks or, you're getting matched up against so many different people that you might face into a warlock and then you're going to face into a hunter and then you're going to face into a paladin and then maybe you'll see a warlock again and then maybe it'll be another warlock, but then maybe you're going to see a death knight. And it's going to take you a lot longer to learn how those different matchups actually work for the deck you're playing, which is one reason why you might hear the advice to practice that one deck for a lot more games, because, how you play your deck against Warlock might be kind of different than how you want to play it against Paladin. Even though you are playing the same deck, it might change up a little bit. So that's something that in card games, I think people kind of tunnel vision. Sometimes when they're playing a deck, they're like, okay, this is aggro. That means I only hit face. And then all of a sudden they're like, man, I just keep losing against, whatever. And it's like, well, I mean, are you, considering how that deck plays against you? So it is kind of like a multi-layered, facet of the game. And some people pick up on that kind of stuff very quickly, very easily. And some people are going to struggle, or it's going to feel like you're banging your head against a wall for 100 games, even maybe with the same deck. And you're like, I still don't feel like I understand this. Or then you go into a matchup and you're like, I don't understand why I'm losing. I've played so many games with this deck. What's going wrong? Maybe the meta shifted a little bit. There was a patch and you're still trying to play the same deck, but now you have to learn matchups all over again because you're facing against different decks. So it's definitely something that is going to take some time. It's going to take some practice. And, a big thing with all of this is give yourself that, like, kind of that grace and that learning, and just recognize that you might learn it faster or slower than other people. And that's perfectly okay, because this is a single player game and you don't have to learn it as fast as everybody else.
And that's a good point too. We were talking about, like, hey, if you're aggro, you got to be. But is it like a good example? I think would be the blood DK matchup. If you give blood DK time, they're just going to get 60 health. They have all the tools to survive. So you might be playing a deck that you consider mid range or combo or whatever like that. You want to get possibly into them as quickly as possible. So you may be playing a mid range deck, but you got to play it like aggro now, because if you give them time, they're going to stabilize. So I have this 4/3 card that Battlecry does something later, and I usually save that for value. But in that matchup, play that card, get that out there, get some damage, get some pressure right onto them, because if not, you're just going to lose. You're never going to do, or you might do your thing and it won't matter because they'll just out heal you. So it's a little more than rock paper scissors. It's more like, well, this time they're rock, I'm scissors, but if I'm going to have to play like paper. You have to be flexible. So just like Dawn was saying, just because something is classified as aggro doesn't mean you have to play the deck. Your matchups will. Yeah,
and you have to adjust to the draws that you're given too, because sometimes even as a fairly low curve deck, you might have a game where you draw your 6-cost card and your 5-cost card and your 8-cost card, and you're like, wow, I can't do anything. And then, you're facing down something and you're like, turn 3, 4, and you're like, I'm going to be dead in 2 turns before I even get to play anything, even if your deck is filled with like low curve stuff. So, there is that variance as well that's going to happen. So that's another key aspect of like playing more games. I am definitely a big advocate for kind of those big arching ideas and concepts, and not to get like too focused on, oh, well, okay, I'm just this deck just does really bad versus blood DK, so I'm probably just going to lose this game. Because I don't think that that's a very good approach to try to improve. So if you look at it and say, okay, well, how can I try to play this and see what happens? It's likely that I might lose if I'm bad against a certain deck, but maybe they just draw really crappy, and then I can draw some stuff and I might end up winning. So there is that too, where the variance of what you are drawing, in addition to the variance of the differing matchups, they all stack up and add to each other.
Yeah, the only way I would say to skip the matchups is if like you were just so tilted, but if that's the case, maybe take a break from the game. If a deck beats a deck 70% of the time, they lose 30% of the time. In baseball, if you hit a ball 3 times out of 10, you're considered a very good player. If you hit it 4 times out of 10, you're considered a phenomenal player. So just think about it like that. Like, yeah, you're probably going to lose, but maybe you won't. And the more you can learn, you can play most decks probably 50-50 when you lose. The way you really start improving is how to squeak out wins against those unfavorable matchups. When you can start winning against unfavorable matchups, even sometimes, that's where you start gaining those percentages that help you kind of advance.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, absolutely. And that kind of plays into some of the things that our live chat tonight is talking about as well. That, sometimes even the top streamers, I mean, top streamers and like top competitors in a tournament, a good win rate for them will be like 60, maybe 65%. Like if they have a 65% win rate, like they are awesome. That's, that like it's typically around like 55 to 60% for most players. And that's an average. There's going to be days where you'll see on Twitter, John Bray or whoever posted and they're like, I had an 80% win rate with this deck. But they don't post it. Yeah, they don't post about the times where then they only had a 40% win rate. So, that's just also keep that in mind. Like there's going to be games that you lose. There's going to be games that you win. But there are some different things that you can do throughout the games, to work on that. But I think just a starting point for people who might feel like they're getting stuck or not understanding certain decks, or if you just copy a deck from somebody and then jump in to start playing it, maybe, as Tito said earlier, like maybe it looks like a mid-range or controlled deck, but maybe you can try to play it a little bit more aggressively. Or maybe you can try to hold some of those cards to do a more combo style, big swing turns instead. Even if it looks like you should be playing something maybe every turn, holding a couple of cards and then playing 3 things at once in one turn might actually give you more results consistently with that deck than if you just played, 1 card each turn.
And as my Lord Chaos in chat suggested, and we have a live chat, which is just phenomenal. Says that I could be a bad player and just blame everything on RNG, but both players have the RNG. That, like when people get upset about, like, if you're constantly getting the bad RNG and your opponent's constantly getting the good RNG, maybe it's not the RNG, maybe it's the play. I mean, supposedly there's an algorithm, but maybe it's not worth going down.
Did you catch that, Daniel? All right.
I'm sure I'll get an angry text message.
That would require Daniel to be listening.
He does.
We'll find out now. Anyway, do you have any final thoughts about archetypes?
I will just kind of my final thing here is, I guess, just use it as a guide, but don't feel like you need to lock yourself into thinking that a deck is a very specific thing when, again, all those factors that we talked about, the variance of your draws, the variance of the matchups, all of that has an impact. So I really hate to see people feel like they have to lock themselves into like, this is an aggro deck, I only hit face, or this is a control deck, all I do is hero, power, and pass. Like, there has to be some kind of give and take and flow in every game. So I hope that people don't kind of lock themselves into thinking, oh, if this deck is this archetype, that's how it always goes.
Yep.
That's fair. I mean, some people are just going to, like, if you look at Bandit Keith, he's just going to go. But that's just the way some people roll. How about you, Doc? Any final thoughts?
If there's a general archetype that you enjoy or that you think you might want to learn, just play that archetype as much as you can, whether it's like an aggro hunter or like an aggro druid. Just learn how different aggro decks play, because that'll help round out how you think about how to play aggro. And same thing with midrange. Like sometimes you'll learn that, like, say, like a midrange druid might have a better like actual mid game than like midrange hunter, but then hunter's early game is better than midrange druid. Each archetype in every expansion is different, but the more you play the archetypes, the more you'll understand how to play it, no matter which class you're playing that archetype in.
And not even just archetypes. If you are playing against Blood Death Knight and you can't figure out how to beat it, best way to figure out how to beat it, play it. And when you get beat, you know how to beat it because you've experienced it.
Yeah. As long as you have the cards to do that, that's definitely a very good recommendation. Or even go try to watch some streamers play
Mhm.
that deck that you're losing against. Or HS Replay, you don't have to have the premium. They do have a free feature. If you go into a certain deck, there's a tab. You can go to VOD, and it will find specific, streams that have that deck. You can even select if they won or lost. You can select if they played against a certain deck. You can select if they went first or second. So you can really pick and choose. Hey, I want to see how other people are playing maybe the matchup that you're losing, and see kind of what they're doing potentially differently as well. So yeah, it's there. That's completely free. You do not have to have the HS Premium for that.
But if you don't have HS Premium, if you show up on March 19th, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we have our next fight night, Just a Guy versus Blister Guy, and we'll be giving away 2 premiums for HS Replay. So there's that. Anyway, Dawn, what do you think next month's topic is going to be, or do you not know yet?
I don't know yet. I know we've talked about, let's see, what did we talk about? We talked about
phases.
Resources?
Yes. Perfect. You both had it. Yeah, we talked about the phases of the turn, and then the resources that you have, and now we've talked about archetypes. So if anybody has a specific thing that they would like to hear about next, let me know. I will absolutely come up with something else, but we can definitely take some listener input if anybody has things that they want to focus on, because sometimes it's also a little bit hard to remember what things you really feel like you wanted to focus on when you were learning, when I was learning this game and really growing and improving 7-8 years ago. So it's been quite a while for me. So some of this is already kind of ingrained in my brain or comes naturally to me. So if anybody does have anything, absolutely would love to hear that. If not, I will definitely come up with the next thing before.
Yeah, one of the things I have a little worry about with the show is we are not a news show. We are not a topical show. We are a self-improvement show, kind of. And not saying that we won't morph and develop as we go. But one of the concerns for me is, how do we have a topic every week? Because it's limited. And I expressed this to our good friend Ridiculous Hat, and he's like, what do you do all day, every day in Discords? Talk about Hearthstone? Yeah, you'll be fine.
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll figure it out. But I don't know about everybody. I'm starting to get a little full, but I think there's a little room for dessert. What do you guys think?
agree.
All right. So Dragon Rider, where can we find you on the social?
Yes. So you can find me on Twitter at DawnieDK. That's DAWNIE DK. You can find me on Twitch, YouTube, TikTok, all of that at Dragon Rider TCCG. And that is also on my YouTube, where I do that TCCG roundtable that I mentioned. I would do a weekly show talking about just a variety of card games, and usually try to dive into various topics kind of like this, just relating to card games in general. And then also every week on the Dr. 3 Standard Hearthstone podcast.
I'd just like to give a shout out to Ron Jeremy, who Ron Mexico. I keep saying that. Ron Mexico. Ron Mexico, who's in the chat, and he just joined the.
How you doing, Tito?
Oh my God. Okay,
he's dead.
There's a little backstory as well. Him and I literally talked about this, and he said he accidentally called Ron Mexico that on stream when he was giving away a coaching. And he told me, I called him that, and I was like, I don't know who that is. So he had to explain it to me, and then he still does it.
That's amazing.
Oh my God. But he actually, it was pretty funny. He Bandit Keith won the coaching, and since then they've been doing joint streams and having fun, so that's been great. But he also joined the TCCG roundtable, and he's fantastic. So make sure you're giving Ron a follow too. Doc, where can
you can find me on Twitter and Twitch at Doc McButt. Tito, how about yourself?
You can find me in shame right now, but you can also find me at Tito Santana HS on Twitter and Twitch. You can also email the show at breadandbutter@gmail.com or find us on Twitter at breadbutterhs. Dragon Rider, do you have any shout outs tonight?
I think actually I would like to take this time to do a shout out for just all the amazing women in our Hearthstone community. March is Women's History Month. This last weekend, the first weekend of March, we did have the Supergirl Gamer Pro Battlegrounds event. And I shared a whole bunch of Hearthstone and women in Hearthstone, history facts, some back from 2017, 2018, 2019. So that was amazing. And just getting to see all of that. But I mean, really thinking about this, there was only 3-4 women who were streaming, kind of in the early days of Hearthstone. And now you can go on there and there's women in so many different languages streaming, who have been encouraged to do content. And it's been really amazing to see the women's scene develop over the last couple of years, and to help be a part of that and have all of the support, not only from other women in the community, but other people as well. So just a huge shout out to everyone who's part of the women community and also supporting all of us women in the scene as well.
Absolutely. I love it. There's lots of great women out there
on
stream, and it's because, like you said, they're coming more and more. And shout out to VK Lion, who I think not only did she win the Worlds, but she dominated. There wasn't even a question who was the best player that year. And this is a space where we should all be welcoming and inclusive to everybody, because Hearthstone is a game and games are meant to be fun. Oh crap! I better file the get our lawyers on. Doc, how about you?
So this week they're gonna be non-Hearthstone related, since I had Ridiculous Hat at the top of the show. Shout out to my old wrestling partner at UTU, Zeke. He's making a run for his second attempt at becoming an All-American at Nationals. And shout out to my old wrestling coach at UTU, Rulon Gardner, who is at 52 years old making a run at his third Olympics. So shout out to them for being studs. And Tito, how about yourself?
Did I hear something about Dance Dance Revolution being in the Olympics or something? Or Just Dance or something like that? Some dancing competition? I heard something about that. I meant to follow up on it. I'm not kidding. This is something I heard about. I don't know how real it is.
I haven't heard anything, but
I think the DDR thing might be a meme, but there was definitely the quote unquote esports Olympic things announced, and a lot of people were like, "Those aren't esports. What is this?" So there's been a whole thing out of that. So yeah, I think the DDR thing is a meme on that, but.
Well, I would like to thank everybody that showed up to chat tonight. Appreciate having a live audience. It makes it a lot more fun, especially when you goof someone's name up. Want to thank Wicked Good for the raid today while we were doing this, and the coaching this week. We have the Coin Concede Listener Series finale in 55 minutes, live on the same channel. If you're listening to this in podcast format, it will already have happened, and we'll hopefully have some kind of recap of that. But that's World 8 versus Potato, and we're very excited about that. Dawn and I will be casting that if Hearthstone is working, because it sounds like Hearthstone's broken right now, which would be very, very disappointing. But we're going to see what we can do. At least technical issues won't be on our end.
Knock on wood. Don't jinx it.
But Dawn, thank you.
Yes, thank you so much.
Having you.
Yeah, thank you,
Doc. Glad you're back, and thank you for working so hard in that episode. Hopefully, this one's a little
this
easier.
one should be.
Sorry about the cough, guys. I still have the same cough that I had last episode. The doctor said it's post-viral cough, and it could last anywhere until May. I'm like, great, that's what I want to hear as a podcaster and streamer. But anyway, that's the end of the show. We're toast, everybody.
See ya. Bye.